Mhm. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Nayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaivanotamam Devim Saraswatim Jasam Tatoja Mudiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nashta Prayeshra Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavatase, Bhagavat Yutamashloki Bhakti Bhavati Naishti. By regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam and by serving the pure representative of Srimad Bhagavatam, one develops loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised by transcendental songs. And devotional service is established in the heart as an irrevocable fact. It's October 4th, 2020. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. Okay. We're on text 37. Text 37. Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 7, Canto 2. All right. Deva Dvisham Nigama Vartmani Ishtitanam Purbi Mayena Vihitabi Advishaturbi Lokan Gnatam Mati Vimoham Ati Pralobham Desham Vidhaya Bahupasyate Upadarmyam Devad Visham Nigamavartmani Nishtitanam Purvirmayena Vihitabir Advishaturbi Lokan Gnatamati Vimohamati Pralobham Vesham Vidhaya Bahubashyata Upadarmyam Deva Dvisham Nigama Vartmani Nishthitanam Purvir Mayena Vihitabir Advishaturbi Lokan Gnatamati Vimo Amati Pralobham Desham Vidaya Bahubashyata Upadamyam Deva Dvisham Nigama Vartmani Nishthitanam Purvir Mayena Vihita Biradrishaturbi Lokan Gnatamati Vimohamati Pralobham Desham Vidaya Bahubashyata Upadarmyam
Deva Dvisham Nigamavartmani Nishtitanam
Deva Dvisham Nigama Vartmani Nishchitanam
Purvirmayena Vihita Viradrisha Turvi
Purvirmayena Vita Viradrishaturbi
Lokan Natan Mati Vimohan Ati Pralobam
Lokan Gnatamati Mohanati Pralobham
Visham Vidaya Bahubashyati Aupadanyam
Desham Vidaya Bahubashyata Oppadarmyam
Deva Dvisham Nigamavartmani Nishtitanam
Deva Dvisham
Purvirmayena Vihita Viradrishaturbi Lokan Gnatam Mati Vimohanati Pralobham Vesham Vidaya Bahubhashyata Upadharmyam
Devadvisham Nigamavartmani Nishtitanam
Deva Dvisham Nigamavartmani Nishtitanam
Purvirmayena Vihita Vidadrishaturvi
Purvirmayena Vihita Viradrishaturbi
Lokam Natham Mati Vimohamati Pralobam
Lokan Natam Mati Vimohanati Pralobham
Vesham Vidaya Bahubhashata Upadarnyam
Vesham Vidhaya Bahubhashyata Upadharmyam
Deva Dvisham Nigamavartmani Nishtatanam
Deva Dvisham Nigamavartmani Nishtitanam
Purvirmayena Vita Viradrishyatubi
Purvirmayena Vihita Viradrishaturbi
Lokam Natam Mati Vimohamati Pralobam
Lokam Natam Mati Vimohamati Pralobham
Visam Vidaya Bahubhashyata Upadamyam
Yesham Vidhaya Bahubhashyata Upadharmyam
Would anyone else like to recite the verse? Okay, we'll go to the word for word. Deva Dvisham, of those who were envious of the devotees of the Lord.
Of those who are envious of the devotees of the Lord.
Nigama,
Nigama,
the Vedas.
Vedas.
Vartmani,
Vartmani,
on the path of.
on the path of.
Nishtitanam,
Nishtitanam,
of the well-situated.
of the well-situated.
Purbi,
Purvi,
by rockets.
by rockets.
Mayena,
Mayena,
made by the great scientist Maya.
made by the great scientist Maya.
Vihitabi,
Vihitabi,
made by.
made by.
Adrishya Torbi,
Adrisha Jordi,
unseen in the sky.
unseen in the sky.
Lokan,
Loka,
the different planets.
the different planets.
Gnatam,
Natam,
of the killers.
of the killers.
Mativi Moham,
Nativi Moam,
bewilderment of the mind.
bewilderment of the mind.
Ati Pralobham,
Ati Pralobam,
very attractive.
very attractive.
Vesham,
Vesham,
dress.
dress.
Vidhaya,
Vihaya,
having done so.
having done so.
Bahu Bashyate,
Bahupashite,
we'll talk very much.
we'll talk very much.
Apadarmyam,
Apadharmya,
sub-religious principles.
sub-religious principles.
Hare Krishna. Translation, this is Canto 2, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 7, Text 37. When the atheist, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha and will preach on sub-religious principles. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This incarnation of Lord Buddha is not the same Buddha incarnation we have in the present history of mankind. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Buddha incarnation mentioned in this verse appeared in a different Kali age. In the duration of life of one Manu, there are more than 72 Kali Yugas, and in one of them, the particular type of Buddha mentioned here would appear. Lord Buddha incarnates at a time when the people are most materialistic and preaches common sense religious principles. Such ahimsa is not a religious principle itself, but it is an important quality for persons who are actually religious. It is a common sense religion because one is advised to do no harm to any other animal or living being, because such harmful actions are equally harmful to he who does the harm. But before learning these principles of nonviolence, one has to learn two other principles, namely to be humble and to be prideless. Unless one is humble and prideless, one cannot be harmless and nonviolent. And after being nonviolent, one has to learn tolerance and simplicity of living. One must offer respects to the great religious preachers and spiritual leaders, and also train the senses for controlled action, learning to be unattached to family and home, and enacting devotional service to the Lord, etc. At the ultimate stage, one has to accept the Lord and become his devotee. Otherwise, there is no religion. In religious principles, there must be God in the center. Otherwise, simple moral instructions are merely sub-religious principles, generally known as upadharma, or nearness to religious principles. Almaganatimirandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshur unmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupakadamayam Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapara Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Garange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpati Yubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 7 entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions, Text 37. Deva Dvisham Nigama Bhartmani Nishtitana Purvir Mayena Vihita Vira Dvishaturbi Lokanknata Mati Vimoham Mati Pralobham Desham Vidaya Bahuba Shata Upadharmyam. When the atheist, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha and will preach on sub-religious principles. Hare Krishna. Okay, so this section of Bhagavatam, we have Vyasadeva narrating a conversation between Sutta Goswami and the sages at Naimisharanya, headed by Shaunaka Rishi. And Sutta Goswami is describing a conversation on the banks of the Ganges between Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit and many great saintly persons. And Sukadeva Goswami is describing kind of at the dawn of creation, or at least at the dawn of this day of Brahma, Lord Brahma, who's really the head of our disciplic succession, speaking to Narada Muni, his son and disciple. And he's looking into the future. He's predicting the future. He's predicting the future. And so that could seem something fantastical here. But if we just get a sense, if we get a sense of the time span of things, if we get a sense of the time span of things, and so Brahma lives for 100 years, and each year has like 360 days or so, right? And then one day is 1,000 yuga cycles. A yuga cycle comes to about 4,300,000 years. And it consists of Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Satya Yuga. So there's 1,000 yuga cycles in 12 hours of Brahma. Means, like, in those 12 hours, there's 1,000 Kali Yugas. So just like if I were, like if I were to say, okay, I can look into the future. Okay, I can look into the future. 2 weeks from this Tuesday on October 20th, Malini Devi Dasi will engage in correspondence with coaching clients. Behold my mystic opulence. Okay. So you might say, well, David Wolf, that's not very impressive. That's not very impressive, really. You're stealing my thunder here. No, I'm predicting the future. So it's like, well, look, anyone who knows Malini Devi Dasi knows that on a given Tuesday or Wednesday, she's going, maybe it's for 10 minutes, maybe it's for 2 hours, she's going to engage in correspondence with coaching clients. It's like, no, there's no like great intuition or mystic vision here. Okay, no, I'm just giving a perspective. So similarly, for us, we can see like Brahma is looking into millions and billions of years into the, but for Brahma, it's just like this, well, this is what my tomorrow will look like. This is what my tomorrow will look like. Okay, just like we can all pretty much tomorrow, who's here? Everyone here, we can all predict, like yeah, there's about 15 on internet. Here we got Payal Keith and Dhira Govinda Das. You know, so like everyone here could predict that all 20 of us tomorrow are going to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and consume prasadam, right? Now, so it's like, there's nothing amazing. But like, let's say for an ant on the wall, couldn't even conceive what we're talking about, right? So similarly for us, we're kind of like that amoeba or that ant on the wall in relation to Brahma, okay? And similarly for Brahma, so now, I just want to make clear, like, for example, in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a somewhat similar chapter where it's talking about 25 of the major incarnations of God. And so now in that one, the Buddha that we're familiar with in this Kali Yuga that appeared about 2,500 years ago, that one is described. Gautama Buddha appeared at Gaya, and that one is described. Now for again, if we look at it, there's 1,000 yuga cycles, 1,000 Kali Yugas in a day of Brahma. So between Kali Yugas, if we do the math, I mean, from our time, it would be about 1 to 2 minutes, and 1 minute and 27 seconds or something like that between Kali Yugas. So Brahma's like, it's just like if we was like, yeah, tomorrow at 3:14 p.m. or 3:17 p.m. or, it's like that. So he's describing, yeah, there's going to be a Buddha, this Buddha, that Buddha, whatever, 3:14, and 2 minutes later it'd be the Buddha who appeared, that we're familiar with. So just to get some perspective here, just to get some perspective. Okay, and so again, the Bhagavatam does predict the Buddha that we're familiar with in history 2,500 years ago. That's especially in the first canto, third chapter. And this is a different Buddha. I'm not clear if was it 1 Kali Yuga ago, a minute and a half ago for Brahma, or was it 5 Kali Yugas in the future, which 6 minutes later for Brahma. Just giving some perspective here, Okay, so now, so that's the thing, just like, we can all, we don't need to be great mystics. We don't need to be great mystics to go that, like, right now it's October. In January, it will be colder. Next August, it will be hotter. Okay, well, so the seasons are predictable. At the same time, not every season is the same, right? Like some Octobers are hotter than others, like that. But the principle here is okay, so there's this Buddha incarnation that appears regularly, apparently maybe like every Kali Yuga, which comes down to about like every 4,300,000 years. And the theme, the details are different, but the theme is nonviolence. The theme is nonviolence. Well, actually, for the Buddha we're familiar with, the aphorism I've heard related to that Buddha is, what he said is, ahimsa paramo dharma. Ahimsa paramo means like the highest principle is nonviolence. That's what he was giving. So, because it was somewhat similar to the Jesus pastime, right? I've seen a bumper sticker that said, when asking what Jesus would do, keep in mind that turning over the tables, that knocking over the tables in anger is an option. Okay, because there's that pastime that Jesus was furious because the rabbis, the corrupt rabbis at the time, they were doing all sorts of nefarious things in the temple of David, the temple of Solomon, including animal slaughter, not according to any regulations. And so he actually turned over the tables. Politically speaking, it was a bad move on his part, right? But so he showed transcendental anger. So similarly with Buddha, but Buddha could see, we're talking about the Buddha here, not the Buddha with these flying aircraft and things. This is a fascinating Buddha incarnation also. And so in the name of the Vedas, there was all sorts of corruption going on. And including or especially animal slaughter in the name of the Vedas. Because the Vedas do describe different ritualistic killing event where the animal doesn't really lose its life, and so it's not really killing, and it requires Brahmins who can chant mantras to actually restore the animal to a youthful body. But in the name of the Vedas, there was just brutality going on in killing the poor animals. So he could see that, like, trying to explain to them what the actual Vedic structure is, that wouldn't work. So he took him away from the Vedas, and his main thing was nonviolence. Don't kill the animals like that. Don't slaughter the animals just because your tongue and belly like the taste of blood and flesh. So this is a very good teaching. It's a very good teaching. To this day, I've asked questions sometimes, but I haven't understood where, like, some in the name of Buddhism, they're still eating meat and things like that. But his main teaching was, don't kill the animals. Be gentle. Don't be violent. Don't be violent unnecessarily. There's also transcendental violence, like Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. And so the principle here is ahimsa, non-violence. Let's see, we hear this, this is even just from the point, so this is from 5,000 years ago, and we have descriptions of rockets and different types of vimanas. It's described, there's several types of there's spiritual airplanes, but there's several types of material airplanes described in the Vedas, brain surgeries described in the Vedas, all these things that according to modern anthropology and historical studies, they would have no clue about such things 5,000 years ago in any part of the world, including what's called Bharatavarsha or India. And so, right, so we can see that after being well-versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, so there's Vedic scientific knowledge of airplanes, and we can see that this was being misused by non-godly people, misused by non-godly people. And yesterday, Narayan made the point about plastic straws. And so the idea, Prabhupada uses this term, unnecessary necessities. And right, because the whole consumerist culture, the idea is to convince us that the latest model of toaster oven, you need that. You don't want that. You need that. Am I singing to your hearts over there at Bhakti Yoga? Okay. Right. Yes. And so, right. So whatever the latest knick-knack is, it's not just about you want it. You need it. And that's marketing, right? That's marketing. Okay. And then I can make money by convincing people that they need. So Prabhupada, this is just such an eloquent term, unnecessary necessities, right?
Can I share something?
Sure.
I remember I was like 21 years old and I had this realization about straws.
Straws.
Yeah, and I was like, and I had the realization about straws that they're unnecessary because you can just get the drink without the straw. And why is there this straw, And at the same time, I realized that robes, like in my mind when I was 21, I was like, you get out of a shower and you put on a whole outfit that's made out of a towel before you put your outfit on. It's just like, why is there this robe between me and getting dressed and this straw between me and my drink? And anyway, it was my that was my self-realization back when I was 21. All right.
Yeah, I appreciate your sharing. So, okay. Yeah, well, Narayan was making, because it's funny, plastic straws. At the same time, he made the point that, okay, and then, now we've improved. We've made things more comfortable, and as a result of all the plastic, now the rivers are polluted, difficult to find fresh water. Animals are dying terrible deaths because they're choking on the plastic, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, we can have a sense of humor, and we can see all these, it's anarta, unwanted things, anarto pashamam saksha, bhakti yogam hoshaji. Yes, that this is our suffering. And so it doesn't mean that, doesn't mean plastic straws are bad, but we're looking at, okay, so whatever we have, like we were also talking, I saw, I'm gonna read a chat. I saw a chat. Yes, Rukmini says, there's stainless steel straws these days. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right, so many examples where the cure causes the solution causes a lot more problems than the problem. examples around yesterday in the course for the Switzerland group. We gave the example like around the turn of the century, 1900, the environmentalists of the time, their big cause was they were advocating, the environmentalists, 1900, to advocating the development of this new invention called the automobile to solve the problem of air pollution, because the horses were causing a lot of problems like that. So if we look at how it unfolded, it didn't work out so well, actually, as far as solving the problem of air pollution. So at the same time, we can see, like Srila Prabhupada, he flew in airplanes. He flew in airplanes, and he used the technology of the day. He used the dictaphone to dictate his purports. He actually, interesting, even though they're in the 70s, I mean, the phone was, he didn't use phone much. Sometimes, we don't have too many reports of Prabhupada using the phone. He wrote letters. Anyhow, the point, of course, is like anasaktasya vishayanyatamo biyunjata nibandha Krishna samvada yuktam vairagam uchate. Yukta vairagya is the key principle. It means to use everything in Krishna's service. So it's not about rejecting. It is about looking at, okay, so these things I'm acquiring, these things I'm accumulating, whether it's a bank account or whether it's those cushions in the corner or whether it's that broken tape player over there, these things, whatever, okay, yeah, to what extent is this an unnecessary necessity? To what extent is this cluttering my mind and alienating myself from living purposefully? And to what extent am I using Krishna's energy in Krishna's service? This is the Vairagya principle. And that's why, okay, so this whole chapter is about different incarnations. We're hearing here about a Buddha incarnation. And yeah, this is something that really attracted me. I mean, my process was very gradual, coming to any sort of serious practice of bhakti yoga, over years, taking lots of prasad. But this is something that very attracted me when I first began to absorb it, the principle of time and circumstance. God acts, speaks, teaches according to time and circumstance. I hadn't heard that anywhere else. And that just, for me, like, that makes, for me, this Krishna consciousness, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, for me, it provides, yeah, it's truly, I appreciate its non-sectarianism, its universality. You say, like, oh, it's not about this group or that group. It's about a process that moves us to transformation of heart, not to become God, to become godly. And it provides a philosophical, historical, psychological foundation to understand and appreciate, in a sense, how everything is one, to appreciate where everything fits. We can take Buddhism as an example. Okay, and again, I didn't find that foundation anywhere else. I would go, yeah, like here, I'm like here in this foundation given to us by Srimad Bhagavatam, we can understand Jesus. Okay, Jesus is a pure devotee of God, and he came for a particular time, place, and circumstance to meet people where they're at and to support them to continue to grow in self-realization and God consciousness. Same with the Buddha. Same with Buddha's approach was subtle, tricky in a sense. In a sense, he took people away from the Vedas because they were so misusing it so badly to bring them to bring them to godliness, So I could understand, like, okay, so like the practices of what goes in the name of Buddhism. Okay, so I can understand, like, the idea is, in a sense, to realize the ultimate emptiness and nothingness and futility of material endeavor. So I could have, right, so the Vedas appreciate that, to realize that everything is ephemeral and temporary, and like that, okay, like that, all right. So so that's important. That's important to help us detach from matter. Okay. And so we can understand the teachings and practice of Buddhism. All right. So let's say we come to some understanding of the futility and emptiness of everything material, the whole drama. Okay, then what? Okay. Then what? Right. Okay, and then there's not much more there. But that in itself, because that's part of it. Okay, then here with Bhagavatam, we have, okay, then we positively engage in spiritual activity. Okay, that's an important, it doesn't reject, the detachment from matter. That's so important. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Projita. Tanya Eshavagam Gyanam Chaita Hituka. Through devotional service, detachment from matter is naturally there. I know I would, not much, but I remember once I visited some, they were called, I guess they're still called some born again Christian group. This was in my undergrad college days, 40 years ago, like that. And just, I had some friends who, brought me there. And they're very, because they were very enthusiastic and very nice people and like that. But then, okay, kind of like, but then the only thing, like, okay, where do these devotees of Krishna fit in? Where do they fit in? And the only thing they get, well, they burn in hell forever. Okay, so I get, well, I don't know. They seem like also good people, intelligent, so it wasn't like a complete platform. They had their devotion to Jesus and a wonderful thing. So here we Achintya Beta Beta Tattva, this Bhagavatam foundation provides a philosophical foundation for understanding how all the parts fit, like that. That's my intellectual experience. And so, okay, so whether it's this Buddha or the Buddha we're familiar with, and you can see the past that, because the Buddha we're familiar with, what did that have to do with flying to different planets and rockets and well-built rockets and like that? So, the details are quite different, but the principle is ahimsa, and ahimsa is it's the Prabhupada's saying it's this sub-religious principle. Prabhupada uses this term, Vedas use this term. So oftentimes we're hearing like 4 sub-religious principles: austerity, cleanliness, mercy, compassion, ahimsa, and truthfulness. And so these are sattvic principles. These are sattvic principles. And yes, important to cultivate. And they go, when Prabhupada talks about these, not in this purport, but he often connects these principles: mercy, truthfulness, austerity, cleanliness. He connects them with the regulative principles of bhakti yoga, regulated sex life, staying away from intoxication, staying away from gambling, and staying away from meat eating, like that. Because if we're involved in those 4 activities, then we're going to be taken away. We'll be distanced from the principles of mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, austerity, like that. So the 4 regulative principles relate to the sub-religious principles, and so these sattvic principles, these sattvic principles, in our efforts at Krishna consciousness, at bhakti yoga, it's important to cultivate goodness, to endeavor to be good people. And that means mercy, not just other humans, but to all species. Truthfulness and cleanliness, austerity, right? The capacity to give up immediate gratification for some higher good, like that. And to make the principles of goodness, to cultivate them, and not make them the goal in itself. That's kind of the integration and the balance here. We've often given the example of the airport. Just like if I want to fly to London, maybe, okay, the best place from which to take off for London is the Jacksonville airport. So I go to the Jacksonville airport. And, okay, but let's say they're announcing the flight to London, but I'm involved, I'm absorbed in a good book, and there's pleasant music in the background, and it's nice here in the lounge. And they announce, David Wolf, your flight is leaving, David Wolf. And I'm just too comfortable there, like that, and I don't get on the flight. So in one sense, it's very important that I got to the Jacksonville airport if I want to get to my destination, London. So Jacksonville airport represents sattvic principles, these sattvic principles. And London represents the transcendental goal. That's that actual spontaneous, loving, devotional service to Krishna. But in another sense, if I didn't get on the plane, then in a sense, I'm not really much closer to London than I was when I was in my house in Alachua. So we don't want to neglect the sattvic principles. That's that artificial trend, the spirit. We don't. That's like the spiritual bypass. It's become a pretty familiar term. In the name of I'm spiritual, and then I'm neglecting just basic good qualities like being a tolerant, patient person, being a truthful person. It's like, oh no, I meditate, I chant rounds, I get up early for Mangal Arti, and so whatever I do is transcendental. But then everyone except me can see that I'm filled with envy and greed and hatred, and I don't keep my agreements and things like that. So the name of our institute, Sattva Tov, Sattva and Tov, goodness, principles. And we, just like, let's say we talked about truthfulness. So Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, describes sattvic communication, what we would call assertiveness. It means what we speak is true, but not just that it's true. Because also in the name of, I'm just telling you the truth in your face, just giving you the truth as it is. I'm such an honest person. That's not sattvic communication in itself. So what we speak is true, and we communicate in a way that's truly beneficial, that's truly intended to be beneficial for everyone involved. That's an austerity of speech, right? Because one sense it's easy to kind of like, oh, I don't want to have that conversation. Maybe I'll just say what I need to say to get by. Or I won't speak the truth, not because I'm peaceful and I don't need to speak, but I'm just too scared to speak the truth. All this tamasic, ignorant stuff, right? And okay, so that's easy, as it is said. If we're only willing to do what's easy, life will be hard. If we're ready to do what's hard, life will be easy. So we can say, well, that's easy. And also, it's fairly easy to just kind of like something comes to me, and I just blurt it out. Here's the truth. Here's what I feel now, like that. But it's an austerity to notice my experience, notice my truth, notice my perceptions, and to be intentional, caring, and bold, and courageous, considerate, to communicate it in a way where I can truly say, my intention is that this will be beneficial for me. Might not be pleasant or comfortable, but beneficial for everyone involved. And that requires really be focused, intentional, courageous, like that. I mean, there's a saying. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. Right? Because we can just write everything, and there's a place for that. But then, well, a shorter letter would be quicker. No, because to really be eloquent and concise, it's more of an austerity of the mind, more of an austerity. So, as I often say, when we're talking about, transformation communication, I'm not intrinsically interested in collecting communication tools or myself or teaching others expertise in communication. I am enthusiastic about a communication-based approach to self-realization, a communication-based approach to connecting with the highest guidance within, a communication-based approach to super consciousness. So this sattvic communication, sattvic listening, this is a sub-religious principle, and it's a healthy platform. We want to cultivate it while keeping the goal in mind. Keeping the goal in mind. Am I actually supporting myself and others to realize who they are as not the body, to realize who they are as a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Do I have London, to use that metaphor? Do I have London in mind, the transcendental objective, the transcendental objective? And then Prabhupada's referencing in his purport, he's referencing Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, text 8 to 12. And for me, it's an especially beautiful part of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about knowledge, the components of knowledge, and really the way it's the process of knowledge. Krishna's talking about the process of knowledge. And nonviolence is there. Nonviolence is there. And it's number 3. And Prabhupada's pointing that out. It said, but before we get to being truly nonviolent, starts with the first one is humility. And that's all throughout Bhagavad Gita. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha dhyatmanitya vinivrita kama dvanver vimukta samadukha samgyaya gachanti muda padama avyayam tat. So Krishna says to go back to Godhead, to really liberate ourselves from the miseries of material existence. First, Krishna lists many first quality, nirmana, pridelessness, humility. Lord Chaitanya's well-known verse, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to string this verse around our neck and to have it with us always. Trinadapi sunichena turori vasahishtuna amanina maradena kirtaniya sadahari. It's the class of spiritual humility. One should see oneself as lower than the blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, desiring no respect for myself, ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state, in such a humble state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. This does not advocate being a doormat. It advocates being a lion for Krishna. Right? So this humility verse means, as far as like my ego, let it go, let it go, let it go. And as far as see that's real freedom. Real freedom is whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever insult, whatever happens, you cannot stop me from continuing to serve with full enthusiasm, continuing to serve Prabhupada with full enthusiasm. That's freedom. That's freedom. Otherwise, if we don't have that humility, then we're always going to be getting to subtler, gross fights here and there. We're going to be into subtler, gross fights here and there. And we'll be distracted from our actual mission of human life. And so Prabhupada's humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, ultimately serving a bona fide spiritual master, Janmarichu Jaravidi Dukadosha Nudarshanam. This is another aspect of the process of knowledge. Realization of the inherent misery. Bhagavad Gita says the inherent evil of being stuck in a body that's subject to birth, death, old age, disease. This is really embarrassing. We should get that. I mean, I'm not getting that. I'm like, no, I got this body. I'm pretty healthy today, whatever. But Krishna's wanting us to get, like, don't settle for this. This is degradation for the soul to be stuck in this stuff. Okay. So, I mean, in another sense, the human body is a beautiful machine. I mean, there's that too. There's that too. And we want to take care of it. And the more I get that I'm actually a spirit soul servant of Krishna, the more I want to take care of my body well. Because the purpose is something more than just gratification of the senses. So, so realization of the inherent unnaturalness of being stuck in a body subject to birth, death, old age, disease. This is process of knowledge. And so the components of knowledge as given in this verse and given in Bhagavad Gita, it assumes, just like here, Prabhupada's using a lot of have to language here. It's have to language. One has to. At the ultimate stage, one has to accept the Lord and become his devotee. It's have to language on the foundation, in the context of full, inspired, joyful get to, right? So Prabhupada is assuming that your goal is you want to be eternally blissful. You want self-realization. You want love of God. Yeah. And if you want that, then here's what you need to do. You have a choice. Even Krishna. If anyone could coerce and manipulate effectively, it's Krishna. And Krishna speaks the whole Bhagavad Gita. And then at the end, he says, Vimishyeta desheshena yate chasita taku. He says to Arjuna, do as you wish to do. Right? Completely honoring the free will. So the assumption is, if we want to realize ourselves as spirit souls, we want to come to love of God, we want to liberate ourselves from the misery of material existence, then here's the guidance, here's the guidelines. And again, that principle of time and circumstance, again, I hadn't seen it anywhere else, because anywhere else, there's like this sectarian conception. My way is the only way. Here, we see, okay, so Buddha comes in different Kali Yugas to give nonviolence, because that will help people to come towards some sattvic principles and open up to self-realization and God consciousness, like that. All right, so this verse reads, Deva dvisham nikama vartmani dishtitanam purbir mayena vihita vira drishaturbi lokan gnatam mati vimohamati pralobham Pesham vidaya bahuba shata upadharmyam. When the atheist, after being well versed in the Vedic scientific knowledge, annihilate inhabitants of different planets, flying unseen in the sky on well-built rockets prepared by the great scientist Maya, the Lord will bewilder their minds by dressing himself attractively as Buddha and will preach on sub-religious principles. Hare Krishna, thanks for your presence and attention. I welcome any questions or comments. Damayanti.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So what are the religious principles, positively?
What are the sub-religious principles?
No, what are the religious ones?
Okay. The ultimate religious principle in the essential meaning of religion, smartavya satatam vishnu vismartavya na jatuchet. Always remember God, never forget God. Yes, and that anukulyena sankalpa partikulyena varjanam, that use everything in the service of Krishna, reject anything that's not used in the service of Krishna. Chanting the names of God, praying for pure devotional service. So with these, that all the principles are meant to serve that essential religious principle, that essential spiritual principle. Yes, thank you, Gajendra. Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma. The nature of the soul to serve God with love and devotion, and that's this in such a consciousness, the soul is not even looking for happiness. I mean, that's very elevated. But even if we're looking for happiness and the way to get it is to serve Krishna, that's pretty elevated too, if we can come to that. But to serve God with love and devotion, and then that's the bliss of the soul, and all the other principles, the truthfulness, the communication principles, the rising early in the morning, a commitment to chant the names of God a minimum number of times. They're all meant to always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. This is the essential. This is the essential principle. Thank you.
Hi, Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yesterday I was speaking with a friend about someone very dear to my friend who is following a strange religion. And what my friend was saying is that I don't understand why God will continue to have that person dear to me follow that religion when that person dear to me is so sincerely praying all the time, praying to God and worshiping God, and then following that kind of nonsensical kind of religion, and specifically right now the religion leader or whatever, they are giving a lot of guidance because they are saying like this coronavirus is the beginning of the end of the world, and end of the world is happening, and the government will come and take your Bible away, and maybe they will imprison you. But like, if you stay faithful to the Lord, then you're going to be saved, and everybody else is going to be annihilated. Meaning the soul is going to be alienated, not simply the people. And then we spoke about how that religion is really mainly following the Old Testament, and how God, like, so that person is really praying sincerely. And from my friend's perspective, she sees that dear person really sincere, and she doesn't understand why God will not awaken her to more absolute, truths about God. And then we look at the God of the Old Testament, and how it's all about obedience and following rules and being punished, and heavy-handed kind of God. And we are like, but it must be God. And is it just one aspect of God? And then I in speaking with my friend, I gave the example of Buddha, and how he is God, and he comes with sub-religious principle. And I'm thinking like, okay, yes, maybe the gods in the Old Testament also come with sub-religious principle. And even so, it's heavy-handed, and that religion is heavy-handed. Maybe that's where that person is at in their evolution. And like that person did live a very righteous, God-conscious life in some ways, and following morality. And so that's what I was thinking during your class, because it was really fresh in my mind. No, I don't have a response. I don't really have a question, but I like to hear your perspective, because that person seems to be really sincere, seeking God and taking shelter of God. But then that sincerity seems to get in the way of looking at the craziness of the church.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. I mean, yeah, like of course it's not for me to comment on that person, what's their inner relationship with God. It's not, who am I to know? And it's in a sense, it's not for me to comment on exactly who is this God of the Old Testament, but but the principle of time and circumstance, and the principle is Krishna, God, is Upadrastanu Mantacha Bhakta Bhakta Maheshwara, Paramatmeti Chaputu De Screen Pushampra. Krishna is the overseer and permitter. And the principle is a God reciprocates with what we desire, and so, and then sometimes, okay, so that's the principle. And again, it's like if someone's like really, really sincere, like I just want to serve you. I'm ready to give up anything, all of my conceptions, all of my ego, all of my status in society. And a devotee doesn't necessarily have to give up anything, but a devotee is ready to give up anything. I just want to serve you. I just want to please you, Krishna. And so that's why it can be dangerous to ask for pure devotional service. Let's be careful. But so there could be sincerity within a particular context, but like outside of that framework, how much is a person, really ready to surrender? Sometimes sincerity is, okay, like sometimes sincerity within, sincerity, but not necessarily distinguishing the baby from the bathwater, right? If I'm really sincere, I'll be able to distinguish the baby from the bathwater. I'll be able to distinguish what is the essential power and essence of devotional service, and what is an institutional trapping, what has become institutional dogma, and name it. Just accept that, and then God likes you. Well, let's really look at that. Let's really look at the teachings of Jesus. Let's really look at the teachings of Prabhupada, and let's follow them with sincerity. And that's different than, I belong to an institution, I'm good. Okay, so then how much sincerity is there to really be an independent and independently thoughtful person, right? Because if I'm really independently thoughtful, and I might pierce through the veil of institutional deception and corruption, and then the people who come to me when I go to the Sunday church or feast, they used to smile at me. Now they're not smiling at me. How ready am I to give up that, like that? So again, I don't know the details of that person, but the principle is God reciprocates with our actual level of sincerity. And a basic, I guess a basic principle I know for myself, a basic principle for myself is to assume that I'm a lot more sincere than I really am. Gajendra.
I wanted to say, as you were speaking, I was thinking like how in the Bhagavad Gita is so clear, because Krishna asks us to give up all kind of origin.
Yeah.
So for sure, we need to be independently thoughtful and not be attached to a dogma, and not to be attached to an institution. And I think that's what's happened in that person's situation, is that the attachment to the institution, the attachment to the status, the attachment to social comfort, the attachment to whatever service is rendered, material attachment, is preventing that person to use their own intelligence. And the other verse that was coming to my mind, it was Sarvadharma, the first one, and Tesham Satatayutanam, like Dadami Buddhi Yoga Tam, at the end, he said, like Krishna gives us the intelligence by which you can come to him. But like in that, there is a sincerity of worshiping him and that surrender. And then even so, we may come from a place of fear because the institution instill fear in us. That fear may be confused with sincerity, but fear and sincerity are not the same.
Excellent points to make those distinctions, and for our advancement in generally requires courage. Yeah, courage to truly be thoughtful. Thank you, Melanie. Gajendra. Let's see. You're on mute right now.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. I know it's getting late, but I was appreciating, get caught up in your enthusiasm in responding to Mother Damayanti and Malini's questions. And I actually found in my own thought, found a pretty large overlap into what each of them was presenting and in your responses. And I was considering how important it is to have a very clear, very clear idea of what the goal is in order to live powerfully. And of course, is, you know, that goal being the essential love and devotion and service, always remembering Krishna, our role as. And so, yeah, there was a really strong overlap that I was between the two. And I'm assuming you can probably see it, but
yeah.
And so I couldn't help, because I'm so attracted to Rupa Goswami and the Nectar of Instruction, that he addresses these things when he talks about, for example, accepting things favorable to devotional service, rejecting things that are unfavorable, following the rules and regulations of the scriptures, but not taking them as absolute, but not, you know. So I really saw these things as very connecting to both what Mother Damayanti was bringing up and what Malini was bringing up in terms of this other person, in terms of resolving.
Thanks for that, Gajendra. Yes. Thanks for that. Thanks for bringing in the principles of Sri Upadeshamrita in this discussion about, yeah, I like how you said, it's clear intention. Like, we're clear on what is the goal, and then that's vital to not get distracted, because then the goal can mean that I have a place, I belong, I have a position in this organization, in this community, right? And yeah, so like that, right? Because it's sometimes the attachment, because there's like material attachments and money, sex, and things like that. But even like spiritual attachment, like I'm attached. Like, well, this is where I go. In terms of, let's call it the Vaishnava context. But this is where I get my kirtan. This is where I get my kirtan. And kirtan's a good thing. It's a good thing to be attached to. But even if we're attached spiritually, then that can interfere with our true free thought, true free thought. Because I don't want to disrupt where I get my kirtan. I don't want to be banned. I mean, it's, you know, like that. So yeah, and so as you know, we organize so many of these in-person programs, of course now in-person, Zoom video or whatever, in many respects. And so we so much appreciate, value, get nourished from these associations, and that's vital. It's vital. And then I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. At the same time, I don't want to be attached to it. I want to be attached to serving Prabhupada and chanting Hare Krishna, which goes along with serving Prabhupada. That's it. And completely satisfied in that. And then whatever association comes with them. I know for myself, to take a stand inside, to practice bhakti yoga, this is what I do. I got kidnapped for that stand. Because I think most of you know, it is a happy ending. Both of my parents were chanting Hare Krishna. 37 or 27 years later when they left their body. But you know, it's like it took a stand. Like I really needed to risk rejection from. Even I remember when after I had joined the temple in Israel, and I went back home, and I had some friends who were laughing at me like that. You're doing this, so you know, and not that I'm an example of courage and like that, but just looking at some experiences in my own life. And then later, you know, in order to continue to actually follow I'm going to say follow my heart, but for me, that's more, it's like follow my intelligence. What makes sense? Okay, so now I'm serving Prabhupada's mission. What makes sense? Then it was vital for me to, to not be attached to any standing or position in any organization or institution, because it didn't, I won't get into details here, but from many points of view, it just didn't make sense. And at the same time, I wasn't becoming bitter. I was becoming more enthusiastic to serve Prabhupada. So what's that look like? And so, yeah. So keep our mind on the goal, on the essential goal. Otherwise, we can think we're sincere, but it takes. We can get deviated without knowing we're being deviated if we have some less than conscious attachments, subtle or gross, or even spiritual attachments. Melanie.
I was just thinking of what you're saying, and also what Gajan Prabhu said about fixing our mind on the goal. And, you know, within an institution, and also within scriptures, we may be guided to a certain goal. Like you know, yesterday my friend was appreciating how in Prabhupada's books, God is described in details and the goal is described in details. And that's why we have an opportunity to it's not our own, like it's not my own. Like I can see over the 30 years of plus practicing Krishna consciousness that the goal became clearer, and each year has become clearer and clearer. So it's like a cultivation of clarifying the goal really over the years, mainly through hearing, also chanting, and mainly through hearing. So what place do we see in that for like being misguided? Like I could be hearing for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years that the goal is the end of the world is coming and you need to be prepared for it. And in the way to be prepared is to do everything the institution is telling you to do. And if you do that, then you're going to be saved. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be saved. And then for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, that's the teachings, that's the hearing, the Shravanam I got. So from the Shravanam, I establish a goal.
What was that? I didn't hear the last thing you said. From that Shravanam?
And I establish a goal.
Establish a goal. Right. Yeah.
I don't want to own that.
Yeah.
Within myself, I don't want to own, oh, I know the goal and the purpose of human life. Well, I don't think I could have figured that out with my own intelligence, and part of the Veda is to really tell us we cannot. Yeah. So I have developed that sense through, and I'm developing that sense through hearing and chanting, mainly hearing from spiritual master, hearing from Shastra. So, but like, let's say, yeah, I had listened, and my hearing was from a different Shastra,
yeah,
or a different church, and that's all I'm hearing. Then how do I, like, where is the place of that? Yeah, within my own free will and own determination, and at the same time, in order to be able to think, like you say, you are not attached to the institution or to look good in the institution or to keep your position, because you had Shastra, because you had an opportunity to hear outside of that from Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, to hear from Srila. It's so important where we're hearing from. And it's no accident where we're hearing from. Right. So in other words, like the the context, well, supposing for 30 years I'm hearing that that only people in my church will go to heaven forever and everyone else will burn in hell forever. Okay, well, so naturally we're influenced by where we hear from. At the same time, what was it about me that I'm hearing from this source for 30 years instead of this source? Or what is it about me that yesterday I was hearing this internet article and that YouTube bar? Whatever we hear from, we're going to be influenced by. We're going to be influenced by. And so we're responsible of where we're hearing from. So in the context of your client's friend or friend's friend, yeah. So he or she was hearing something for 30 years. Naturally, their intelligence is influenced. My intelligence is influenced wherever I'm hearing from. So, but at the same time, it's no accident that he or she, they were just thrown into that church sermon for 30 years. They're responsible for that. That's at some level, that's what they wanted to hear.
When I was in my 20s or like teens and 20s, I decided to be Christian, mostly my teens. And I was really distraught over like the teaching that everyone that I loved would be going to hell forever because, I love them. I thought they should be Christian. So I would cry to my dad about it. And he'd be like, no. He wasn't Christian. So like, I'm not going to hell. You don't have to worry. He was reassuring me. And I was like, oh, I don't know. So I just sort of put it out of my mind. But then over the years, I tried to go. I like didn't practice or attend church. And I tried to go around and visit all the churches. And anyway, I don't know why I'm sharing this. Just that I had to be honest with myself at some point that it wasn't making sense to me. And then I just said, I guess it's really scary. It may be blasphemy. But I can't believe this. So, and it wasn't comfortable, and it took like sort of months to like separate. Not that I didn't, not that I disregarded everything that I was. I mean, it really was just a social thing. When I think about it, I wasn't studying the Bible. To be honest, I wasn't studying the Bible, but I wasn't throwing out Jesus altogether or religious principles. I didn't even grasp any religious principles during that time. I considered myself Christian. But the main thing was like, well, if my loved ones are going to hell or anyone's going to hell because they don't believe this particular stance, I can't practice this. And that's where I thought Christianity was. It was not very deep, but anyway. Yeah, but how did I have an independent thinking mind, at least at some point?
At some point, yeah, you were independently thoughtful enough to not be attached to the social thing, and that's what it often is, a social thing. And yeah, there's no reason to throw out because the idea of everyone will burn in hell forever. All we need to do to be reasonable is to delete the word forever. Right? Because what's that?
Well, I have a Christian friend who she doesn't believe in hell forever. The actual wording is that if you sin, I don't know the word is, but if you do those things, against Jesus's teachings, you'll perish. It's not exactly the word. She clarified that for me, and I didn't study it or look it up, but it's not, the word forever isn't spoken by Jesus.
Right. So Saint Augustine said, or that's what I heard. We're not punished for sin. We're punished by sin. Meaning, like, well, we're all burning in hell. Like in this lifetime, we can all look at hellish experiences we've had that have burned like fire, right? And so so the true part is there are consequences for our actions. There are consequences for our actions. And then also, as we get from Bhagavatam and from Jesus's actual teachings, also God is merciful. There are consequences for our actions, and those consequences are meant for us to turn to our eternal blissful life. So there's no eternal damnation. At the same time, there are really, really hellish conditions in this universe. It's not theoretical. We've all experienced them. Gajendra, thank you, Damayanti. You're on mute.
related, I'd like to mention two things. The first is an appreciation of Srila Prabhupada's broad-mindedness and liberalness. I believe it's maybe in an introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam that he mentions the word Veda, and he does so in a very big way. Not like the Vedas are these particular scriptures in India, and you have to like this is the knowledge, and only to. He just said anything that's knowledge is Veda. So this was very kind of unlimitedly expansive, and I wanted to mention that appreciation of Prabhupada's broadness and liberality when it comes to small-mindedness or sectarianism. The other thing I'd like to mention, if I may, and I think probably it doesn't just apply to me, but I'll give it in my personal experience, is in the 1970s, I joined an extremely wonderful organization that was founded by Srila Prabhupada. And at the same time, I'm not saying that Prabhupada founded a cult, but there were aspects of it that I think could be fairly described as cultish in the mentality of the members. But the thing I want to say is I also see how that served. It really, really served in a way, and in my personal experience, just due to the egoism of a materially conditioned soul that wants to feel superior and right. Oh, I've joined this group and we're the ones who really understand and got the knowledge and all this stuff. And that was very useful for me, probably staying in that group and hearing Srila Prabhupada and studying Bhagavatam every day. And fortunately, there was a really high-end Bhakti program in those days, and studying all the books and chanting Hare Krishna and getting the association. And so it was, it really served a purpose at some time for a certain period of time. It was aligned, for that time, it was aligned with the prime principle.
Gotcha. Yeah. It worked for you at some time. And yeah, I get that. Yeah, right. So it served. It supported the ultimate goal. At the same time, looking back, you can analyze and see there were some narrow sectarian cultish aspects, and yeah, both perspectives are valid. I appreciate your sharing, Gajendra. Okay. Let's see. So Rukmini's writing. Once in Jordan airport on the way to India, we almost missed our flight, not hearing the announcement while preaching to a scientist. Catching up. Okay. Got it. Thanks for sharing. Right. So Jordan represents the mode of goodness there. Thank you. Narayan. You're on mute. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I appreciate the nuances of the discussion in your class, and I was in regards to what Mani was sharing, what Gajendra Prabhu was sharing about, kind of going into like perhaps feeling misled or like spiritual life kind of being tainted with something else. I was just thinking about it from the perspective of eternality and like the time scales that you were mentioning at the beginning of the class. It's like those really like those little, they're like blips, and I can imagine it's just like this self-correcting process where our sincerity is being really like actually brought out through different experiences, that our soul gets to experience. And of course we want to nourish that with Shravanam Kirtanam from a bona fide source, but I can also see how, in the grand scale of things, those are really like insignificant deviations on the path forward. And in relation to that, I was curious, my mind was curious about a specific detail when you were talking about Brahma and we measure days and years relative to our sun. I'm just wondering if it's mentioned in maybe the fifth canto or something about like, or in creation in the first, like if what Brahma's years are calculated by, like what is that in relation to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't have information about that. I mean, you know, like, because like for us, it's related to the sun. And so for Brahma, is that related to the sun of this universe in some way? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We just know that Brahma lived 100 years, which in Earth years comes to 311 trillion, 40 billion years. And then how's that relate to the sun? I'm not sure. And you know, I think we could do some research. One thing we could research is that at the annihilation at the end of each day of Brahma, does the sun get destroyed and then does another sun get created? Or is the sun one of those top planets that don't get destroyed at the end of the partial devastation? Interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate, Narayan, how you tied together the beginning of the discussion with the epic scope of time with what we're talking about here, and time and circumstance and cultish and deviations and like that. And yeah, and just like the whole Kali Yuga is maybe, you know, whatever, about 12 seconds for Brahma, you know, like that. So Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.